A very good evening to you and welcome to yet another edition of Face the Nation. Now, what is going on right now in the country? We are just 9 days away from a general election. Now, who must you vote for? As Socrates once said, he is not trying to teach anyone anything. He makes people think. And that is exactly what we are doing as a network as well. We want you to think wisely before you exercise your franchise on the 17th of August. Now, the topic of discussion will revolve today around the election manifestos of the three main political parties, that is the United National Party, the United People's Freedom Alliance, and also the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. We are in conversation today with Mr. Iran Vikram Ratna. He is the Deputy Minister of Highways and Investment Promotion. And also joining us this evening is Professor Kapila Pereira, JVP Nationalist candidate. We will be joined by Professor Rajiv Jaisingh, who is a UPFA Nationalist candidate and also leader of the Liberal Party shortly. So let's start off with Deputy Minister Iran Vikram Ratna. Deputy Minister, during the last 7 to 8 months, many allegations have been leveled against your government with regard to good governance. How do you counter this allegation? The time starts now.
I think that the debate on good governance began more recently, and I think it is the basis on which a new president was elected, and people have set very high standards and have very high expectations, and I would agree that very high expectations are not met. However, I would like to say that there is definitely a huge change from the past. It's a huge change, a big change. People have the freedom to express themselves. One thing I keep saying is that I'm known now because of the private media channels, including MTV and Sirasa, because I came into Parliament as invited into Parliament. In 2010, I was the CEO of a bank, a professional, invited on that basis to take a nationalist seat. I had been on government channels up to that moment, but I came into Parliament in 5 years, not a single government channel ever invited me to express any opinion. It's a difference today, that the opposition even today, if you look at any channel today, government channel, they could express themselves. So there was a change, and that change was freedom. The other thing was there's expectation that in the decision-making process that better decisions will be made. Now, some of the issues are systemic. Like, if I would give you an example, when governments change, there are government institutions, and to these government institutions, people have to be appointed. Now, what happens is you appoint people, but there is no fixed and set criteria of how those appointments actually happen. Now, my view is that you should first, it doesn't matter who nominates the people, you should have a fit and proper test, right, to see if somebody is fit and proper. Then you should see if somebody has the qualifications for it and the experience for it. Now, the good governance would actually require that. But actually, when we took over government, when President Maithripala Sirisena came into office, those processes are all not in place. So, appointments happen. By and large, I would say good appointments happen, but there are still problems. I think it's not the individuals. We've got to fix the system, and I think that will take some time to do. And I'm hoping that when a new government is elected in about 10 days' time, that process will happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iran Vikram Ratna. He is the Deputy Minister of Highways and Investment Promotion. I now move on to Professor Kapila Pereira, JVP Nationalist candidate. Professor Pereira, why is the election manifesto of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna different from the manifestos presented by the United National Party and the United People's Freedom Alliance? The time starts now.
Thank you very much. On behalf of JVP, I must thank the Sirasa MTV. Yes, the basic thing is this is a manifesto with people's consciousness. If you want to talk about the manifestos should not bring in loads and loads of promises, cheap, popular promises. This is a basic thing every strata of the society should feel. Every society of the society has the pulse. If the pulse is felt, and what are the problems, what are the issues to be identified for a person to be independent, free thinking, and free from shackles, and live happily in a country where you are born. That is how it differs from other manifestos, I would think. I would like to put it this way.
Professor Pereira, many say that the manifesto presented by the Janata Vimukti Pyramid is not national. Example, it does not even revolve around the national question, which has been plaguing Sri Lanka for nearly 3 decades. How do you counter this allegation, Professor?
Well, it addresses the point. Any citizen of this country should live starts with that
you have a clause which says a free man. However, that does not really entail what is required with regard to the national question, addressing the grievances of the minorities in the country.
It addresses actually if you read the manifesto, it starts with that any independent, irrespective of the caste, creed and the religion, all the people, the Muslims, Tamils, Sinhalese, majority, everybody should coexist together. That is the vision of the JVP manifesto. It outlines, it starts there. I mean, equitable social justice for everybody, irrespective of your caste, creed or the nationality.
Can the JVP form a government?
Yes, if people votes, why not?
Do you think it is practical at this time around, this election? Will your party be able to form a government?
We are hopeful that people have eternally, people have taken this issue. I mean, you have tried many different avenues, and people talk about in the town, if you go in the streets, okay, we should try it out with JVP. Yes.
Professor, you sound very pessimistic when you say people have to try out the JVP. Do you think your party will join another party, probably the United People's Freedom Alliance or even the United National Party, if it comes to a point the formation of a government comes into play?
In the past we have tried out, but let's see how outcome of the result after 17th. We have to answer that question.
Thank you very much, Professor Kapila Pereira, for joining us this evening. Let me introduce our journalists. On to my right is Nabi Majid. On to my immediate left is Bandula Jayasekar. Thank you very much, Bandula, for joining us. He is a journalist and also a former diplomat. And on to my far left is Faraz Shaukat Ali, who is an independent investigative journalist. I open the floor for questions. Let's start off with Bandula.
Iran, I think you are a deputy minister, but you, like the people elected Mr. Maithripala Sirisena. And you became a deputy minister of an accidental government or a minority government. So people had expectations, and that's why they elected Mr. Maithripala Sirisena. But like you agreed now that you haven't lived up to it. Why?
Yeah, it's not that I agree that we haven't lived up to it. What I said is there are shortcomings. I think it will be really foolhardy and incorrect for me to claim that it was a perfect government. Maithripala Sirisena was the result, if you want, of a movement. I always say that people in this country voted for a change. Maithripala Sirisena became the icon of that change. Wherever we went in the country, and we followed as an opposition member, and I in particular, from the day I came into Parliament, I was on the Committee on Public Enterprises, had an opportunity to review public enterprises in the country for 5 years, also to look at the corruption that was there, visit places. At one point, I didn't realize that going and visiting places, questioning investment, looking at corruption was life-threatening. You see, and I will never forget the 17th of August 2014, when I was threatened by a man with a pistol, who later, being a newcomer to politics, I don't recognize faces, later I came to know was the mayor of Hambantota. So we went through a whole process. Everywhere I went in the country, where I could see what was happening. And as we went back, we also realized that people had common problems. Housing, education, health was another area in which they had problems. You had the political and social issues, you had the economic issues.
And we realized that if you have to bring about change, we have to bring all these forces together. We began to think that these problems didn't have a color. It was not blue, it was not green or red or whatever. It was really common. And we evolved the idea that maybe to bring everybody together, a common candidate, the concept would be good. While this process was going on in the United National Party, I must give credit to civil society. There was a movement in civil society.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. I think Bandhu's question was directed at the shortcomings during the last 6 months.
Yeah.
We know what exactly happened or transpired. On the 8th of January, people wanted change. There was Maithripala Sirisena elected as the president. But the last 7 to 8 months, the shortcomings, if you can elaborate on
so
those.
what I was trying to build up to was that change, right, was a movement. The change was a movement. The UNP gave it, if you want, its political hands and feet. And then it was able to install a new president, and with that president, right, one major issue was of installing the senior most judge on the bench as the Chief Justice of the country. That is significant. It was an indication that there was going to be a separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary, right? And I think just establishing that principle was important, and I would count that as a major achievement of what we actually did.
But isn't it also a failure of the United National Party? The first time you brought General Fonseca, because it showed the bankruptcy of the grand old party, the United National Party. Again, it showed the bankruptcy of the United National Party. You brought the General Secretary of the SLFP. I mean, you showed the bankruptcy of the UNP, and then how could you go to the masses now and ask to elect the UNP?
I don't think that you could call it the bankruptcy of the party. The circumstances you referred to after the war were very different circumstances, and the people who had actually, if you want, led the war, right, and you had President Rajapaksa giving political leadership, you had General Fonseca and the other leaders of the armed forces giving military leadership, and then you had others in it. And therefore that election was fought on the basis of, you know, who gets the kudus for destroying terrorism, you see, and that election was fought. The United National Party, yes, has been in opposition after that, and we were looking at basically we need to change it, we need to change the system. I think what we do have in place, right, is that we have a team, the United National Party. Ranil Wickremesinghe is an experienced leader. And if you look at the members of parliament that we have, there are seniors, there are a whole lot of new faces. The new face team is a professional team. Everybody has an education, everybody has some kind of an experience. And I think it is important that in the change that we are going to see in the future, that will matter. What happened in the 100 days is it was a coalition government. I wouldn't call it a United National Party government, right? It was a coalition government. And therefore, what changed was the president. That if you want, the structure of government did not change on the 8th of January. I can give you one example which might illustrate this to you. You know, there's a cabinet, papers go to cabinet. Before cabinet, there's a subcommittee of cabinet which sits, and it's called an economic subcommittee. And the draft papers go up there. It's a process, right? And the minister of the subject, highways and investment promotion, was overseas. And Honorable Kabir Habshim requested me as a deputy minister to be present at the subcommittee. And I was present at the subcommittee, and you know, the Prime Minister was chairing it. A paper was taken. It said item number 2 or 3, paper from the Ministry of Highways and Investment Promotion, and it says monorail project for the city of Colombo. I can't remember the exact amount, but a big amount, like $300 million or something. I was sitting there and I had never heard about the project, right? I am generally informed because, for example, particularly on transport, the Morato University has done a lot of work, and it's not since I came to politics, even as I was the head of the National Development Bank, I used to have the connections with the university, I used to be well informed. This project came in there and I never heard about it. So what do? It's very rude to do it. It's like being in this show. I reach out to my phone and I take a call, and I call the minister overseas and I ask the minister, this project has come, I don't know anything about this project, why haven't you told me? And the minister goes, even I don't know about this project, right? And fortunately for us, the Prime Minister looked at it and said, you can't put this to cabinet, this is a big project, this needs a lot more evaluation. and he set the paper aside. While the meeting was gone, I went around and I took the paper and I looked at the paper to see. The secretary had put the paper, and I looked at the attachment. The attachment was some old paper which is a recommendation from the former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, obviously which should have been put on a former date, attached as a justification. So the reason I said that story is just to illustrate the point that the president changed, but the structure of government did not change. And that was very disconcerting to me. So when people wonder whether you have achieved things or not achieved things, there are certain problems.
When you say that the president changed and that the government, that the structure of the government didn't change, are you blaming the state or the state's mechanisms for the shortcomings of the government?
I am, in the sense that the system has got so politicized, very politicized, right? And it needs a cleanup. It needs a cleanup. And I'm hoping that I think Mr. Bandula Jayasekara was absolutely right, when he said we are a minority government, and there were very big limitations. Whatever we did had to be approved by the opposition in what we were doing. But I think reform, right, that kind of reform will require a strong government with a majority to push ahead with it. And to depoliticize the system, we have to make the 19th Amendment work, we have to make the Constitutional Council work, we have to make sure that the different commissions are appointed. All that will help in the depoliticization process.
Professor Kapilapaya, I want to bring you into this discussion. You made some interesting remarks in your opening statement about the JVP, how the party will decide whether it's going to join another party and form a government, or whether it's going to stay in opposition after the 17th of August. Now we've seen the manifestos of the two main parties and the Our Vision manifesto of the JVP as well. There's something about the JVP that doesn't give me too much cause for confidence. If the JVP, if as you say the people decide to vote for the JVP and they give the power of government to the JVP, will it be like giving a new toy to a child?
I wouldn't think so, because if you take the JVP has a role to play in this country. Even historically it is so. But you look at me, I mean, people want to help a party which is genuine, and then want to address the issues of the people. After all, you take any other party, it's the people of Sri Lanka, the human beings of Sri Lanka. I mean, you just divide it by the ideas and ideologies.
Well, my question is this, Professor Pereira, is the JVP grounded in realities of running a state, of running a country?
No.
The financial realities, the constraints of money, will the JVP just simply turn Sri Lanka into a sort of welfare state?
I think any government, not only the JVP, is that the export earnings is less. I mean, you take for over the last some decades or so, export earnings is less than what we have to import. So it's not the JVP's money, it's our wealth of the nation. So
can the JVP manage that wealth better than the UNP or the UPF?
Definitely. There's how? Because they have we have stated in our manifesto, it's basically better management and less corruption, and we are simple, and you have to believe it, and you have to give it a try. I mean, it's just like you are managing your families, be it big or small, rich or poor, right? Somehow you live, but it is not somehow you live, but you have to take the bigger picture of a country, because where the Sri Lanka,
for example, one of the key things for Sri Lanka's economic development is that the country needs investment, foreign direct investment. We've heard from the two main parties what their plans are to attract foreign investment. What is the JVP's plan to attract foreign investment to the country?
JVP also has mentioned in the manifesto the tax benefits and the people-friendly, environmental sustainable projects, and transparency in attracting the foreign investments. They have spelled out in the manifesto.
Thank you very much, Nadeem. Just want to invite and welcome our guest, that is Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, who is the UPFA nationalist candidate and also leader of the Liberal Party. I want to remind all three guests, that is Mr. Vikramatla, Professor Pereira and also Professor Vijayasinghe, that when you are levelling allegations against an individual, please make sure that you have concrete evidence to prove your claim, because as a network, we will not take responsibility whatsoever for the statements that you make. First,
Mr. Vikramatla, you said that you all went looking at corruption firsthand and your incident in Hambantota and so on. But once in office, it seems that there's been a lack of any sort of progress on that, no proof. We have, I think, a couple of people who've been remanded. One is still in remand over some vehicles, but those are that will not even change. So what happened? You gave us the impression that you all had all the details.
Yeah, I agree with you that you know, you're expecting very quick results, and the results you expect are not as quick as you think. But this is how I think we need to see it. This is not a political witch hunt. This has to be a judicial process fighting corruption. And therefore it is something like this, you know, a lady puts her jewelry in the almirah and it's kept there safely. One day she opens the almirah and she finds that her chain's gone. She knows the chain has been robbed and stolen because it's not there, but she has to now get the police and the investigators to actually find the chain, and then to find who robbed it and to prove in a court that so and so robbed it. Now, between losing the chain and going through that process to prove who robbed it and putting that person or giving that person a punishment, there is certainly a gap. Now, that is the issue that we are really facing, particularly when it comes to financial crime, right? First thing is, I would say that no person in this country of significance, whether politician or official, has really been convicted of financial crime of the nature I'm talking about. And another thing in financial crime is, it's just not local, it's international. And when you are fighting financial crime, right, you have to get international agencies involved. You have international law. And then particularly, if you are looking at transactions through banks, the banking laws internationally are very stiff, and actually being able to get the evidence into a court of law. So what we have done, I can tell you, in this period of 6 months, is we have created, if you want, the mechanism to look at the financial crime, to get the evidence. Some of that evidence has already been obtained, and some of that evidence is now with the Attorney General's Department. Now we are waiting for the Attorney General's Department to actually file those cases.
Mr. Vikramatla, I want to ask that for a second. Yeah,
is it a case of the Attorney General's Department being underpaid, overworked? Is that why we've got the FCID say that they've completed 20 investigations, but none of them has reached court? Why?
Yes. Now, I don't know whether the judicial process in this country anyway moves very slowly. Those who have had to interact with it know it through their experience that cases take an awful lot of time. I mean, it's unheard of. Some cases have gone on for 10, 15, 20 years. It's unheard of. So the process moves slowly anyway. But in this particular situation, I do not know whether there is an attempt to actually slow down the process of justice. And this is one of the things that we will do after the new government is in place. There's another little, can I make just one little quick point?
Yes.
There's another little thing that I discovered in this process that's going on, is that you have different institutions of government. Like you have the police, you have the anti-bribery commission, corruption commission, and so forth. And different people are investigating different things. But when it comes to sharing of information, and when an investigation is overlapping, even those processes are not enabled by the law. So we have found some lacuna in the law as well, which we are hoping that we can correct when Parliament is formed.
Professor Vijayasinghe, do you want to comment on the statement that was made by
I'm sorry I came late, but as I came in, I heard my good friend Mr. Vikramatna saying that, reforms tend to have to be slow, they need powers. This is complete nonsense. All they need is goodwill and deep commitment. When this government was elected, or the president was elected, there were firm commitments in the manifesto. We had a Minister for Democratic Governance. He actually set up a subcommittee to give him suggestions. Mr. Vikramatna was on that subcommittee, he didn't even come to the meeting. I think I'm the only one who actually gave suggestions of judicial reform, of financial reform. Several proposals were put. All I got in response was, your ideas are very good, but it's difficult to change the political culture. And I said, that's what Mr. Karu Jayasuriya. I have a letter. And I said, Mr. Jayasuriya, I wrote to him, we were elected to change the culture. If you take corruption, okay, on the one hand there are judicial measures. I agree that our processes are slow, but they could be expedited. But on the other hand, we have promised transparency, a very simple measure which I recommended, which doesn't take a great two-thirds majority. Change the law so that all declarations of assets are public property of people who have financial powers. Allow the media to look into them and ask questions. At the moment you can look into them, but then you can't talk about them. And also allow the public to comment. In Thailand, we should look at what's happening in other countries. In Thailand, they have a concept called being unusually rich. So if you have actually got much more money than you had 3 years ago, or if people claim that these houses are yours, allow that to be investigated, because in the end, I would agree with Mr. Vikramatna that our processes are slow, but who are the best guardians of transparency and probity? It is the people and it is the media. One big problem we faced in January is that we all agreed the presidency had too much power. But that power had to be given to other institutions, not just transferred to the Prime Minister, as I'm afraid the Prime Minister wanted. Even this FCID set up under him is outrageous. What we need is to have new institutions. And we promised to strengthen Parliament. That was not done. We promised a code of conduct. We promised a Right to Information Act. And that is one of the keys, that Right to Information Act. When it was drafted, I actually sent a response to the Prime Minister saying, include publication of assets. These are things that are very easy to do if you have a will.
Professor Vijay Singh, with regard to right to information, I'm sure you would recall a couple of years ago when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president and the UPFA was in government, we had this discussion. Deputy Minister Evan Vikramaratne, who was at the time a UNPMP, was also here. A program called Platform for Good Governance, which ran from this studio right here. I asked you this question about right to information in relation to the budget that had just been passed, about so many finance bills that had been brought in as urgent bills and passed in a rush, and we're still waiting for right to information, which is not really rocket science.
Perfectly correct.
But you were blaming it then on the legal draftsman's department.
I do that still, because the legal draftsman took a very long time. Not only on that, when I left the government, when I left the government, I wrote a letter to Mr. the President Mahinda Rajapaksa, saying there were several bills we had promised. I know for a fact the higher education bill was killed by the legal draftsman's department. The education bill was not that was actually Parliament, which took far too long, and the ministry didn't push. But I fully agree, we were far too slow on legislation. That is why I wrote that letter. That is why I thought we needed a change, and that is why I'm most disappointed that we didn't give reform, and more reform the priority that was needed from January onwards. Of course we should have introduced this. The Right to Information Act was drafted. It is a good draft, but it could have been better. I sent a response to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, also about the audit bill. This was in March. Not a word from them in response. 3 months later, Parliament is dissolved. We were promised that those would be put to Parliament in May. Nothing of the sort.
Can I just respond very quickly? I don't completely agree with Professor Vijay Singh that the government was solely responsible. For example, on the 19th Amendment was moved in Parliament, and there were amendments basically to make it difficult for members who get elected through one party crossing over to another party. Then there were counter amendments brought, basically, and it was, if you want, completely nullified. Then the Constitutional Council was proposed with more members of civil society. The opposition made the case that no, we should have more members of parliament on it. We didn't like it, but despite that we agreed to it because we felt that we can't throw the baby with the bathwater. We have to rescue the 19th Amendment because it had good salient features as well. Then when you talk about the right to information, we have been for the right to information. When we were in opposition, we have included in the 19th Amendment, right, the citizens' right as a constitutional right now to information. But I agree with Professor Vijay Singh that we need the bill. I agree with that. We then offered to bring the bill as an emergency bill, at which point Mr. Dinesh Gunawardhan actually objected to it at that point, and we couldn't introduce it as an emergency bill. Personally, I'm not too much in favor of emergency bills myself, but I thought on these circumstances that bill, even as an emergency bill, if all of us had agreed in Parliament, could have been done. On the publication of assets, I want to say this, right? Even now you have the right to actually pay a fee. It's 250 rupees or something like that, and access the assets of a member of Parliament. I was informed by Parliament some time ago.
We have to wrap. We need to go for a short commercial break. Mr. Ratna, you will get your time to speak and rebut to the points that was raised by Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh. We now go for a short commercial break. When we come back, we're in conversation with Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh, the Deputy Minister Ran Vikram Ratna, and also nationalist candidate of the JVP, Professor Kapila Pereira.